Mr. President, I wanted to come to the floor today for a moment and introduce an issue that I've become interested in over the last few months, one that, quite frankly, I didn't know a lot about before I came to the Senate, and it's the issue of human trafficking and slavery. For many Americans, for many of us in the 21st century, we think of slavery as a concept of the 19th and 18th century, something that happened in other places and a long time ago, when in fact it exists even today around the world. The issue is actually pretty startling. The State Department estimates that there's between 700 and 800,000 people in the world each year that are trafficked. The number of people trafficked in the United States is about 16 to 17,000. That's a lot of people in the 21st century that are being trafficked and are held in bondage. And I saw a special on a cable network recently that outlined this issue, and then started researching on it. I was shocked to learn that my home state of Florida is particularly affected by this issue. So recently I had the honor and the privilege of being appointed to the Helsinki Commission, the group here in the Senate that works along with the House as representatives, as commissioners on that commission. And we held a hearing yesterday on the issue of human trafficking. And it's an issue that I'm going to be increasingly speaking about over the next few weeks, because I truly believe it's one of the great humanitarian causes of this new century. And it begins with awareness, with a clear understanding of what's happening around the world with regard to this issue. The fact that there are these people, as we speak, as I stand here today, perhaps within walking distance of this very building, there are people held against their will in servitude. Now, the one that gets all the publicity, and rightfully so, because it's so painful to think about and so outrageous, is sex trafficking. Children and young girls and young women that are brought into this country against and held against their will as sex slaves. It also happens all over the world. It's sad to learn that there are actual governments around the world that cooperate with this and tolerate it and are corrupted by it. And that gets a lot of publicity and attention, and we're going to be paying a lot of attention to that. We heard stories of diplomats that work in this city, diplomats from other nations who come here and bring domestic workers with them to their homes and hold them here against their will and take their entire paycheck. And we're going to be denouncing some of those people on this floor by name in the weeks and months to come. But the other thing that was shocking, although, as I said, the sex trafficking gets a lot of attention, is the forced labor aspect of it. People that are recruited in other countries, and they're brought here and they're told, we're going to bring you to the United States, you're going to come here, and you're going to make a living, you're going to make some money, you're going to be able to send it back home. And when they get here, they're held against their will, they're not paid. In fact, sometimes they owe the traffickers money, and they're held in squalid conditions. And that's happening right here in this country, underneath our very nose. This is now, not to mention the egregious cases around the world, and we're going to focus on those cases around the world as well. The State Department, by the way, ranks every country in the world on the basis of how much they cooperate and the progress they're making on prosecuting and investigating these issues, and those tiers are available to you. A report came out recently, and it identifies the countries that are doing well, the countries that are trying to do well, and the countries that, quite frankly, couldn't care less and actually don't mind this stuff going on in their jurisdiction. And they deserve to be condemned, not just on this floor, but in the international community. And we'll talk about that as well in the weeks to come. But I don't think we can point the finger at anyone unless we look at ourselves as a nation and as a society and call attention to this issue. So as I begin to introduce this issue and my involvement in it, there are a couple things I want to point out from yesterday's hearing. The first is that this is largely occurring as a result of criminal enterprises. The same people that traffic drugs and involved in all other kinds of organized crime are also involved in human trafficking. We see that increasingly in major areas, and we've seen prosecutions. But we've also learned that increasingly what we're finding are small-scale operations, sometimes families. We heard the case of a mother and her two sons who were involved in a human trafficking ring. And it's very profitable, very lucrative. It costs them about $10,000 to bring a young woman into this country, and they can make that money back in the sex trade within a few days, and after that it's all profit. And it's outrageous. And it's opened the door for small-scale operations that are doing this. What are the impediments to dealing with this issue? There are a few, and they're going to take a long time to work on. But the first, unfortunately, is a lack of recognition. I think at the local level and even at the federal level, our law enforcement officers and personnel who want to do the right thing probably need some more information about identifying these cases, seeing the markers of human trafficking, identifying cases that clearly reek of human trafficking, and identifying those and treating them as what they are. The second thing we need are better protections for these victims. You know, you're not going to be able to prosecute people and put them in jail unless the victim is willing to testify. And victims aren't going to testify if they don't feel secure. If they feel you're going to deport them or put them in immigration jails, or worse, if they think that these organized crime rings are going to harm their family members overseas, it's going to be very, very hard to get victims to cooperate. And last but not least, and I know that this is a complicated issue, but our immigration system is contributing to this. We have a very complicated immigration system, and it's an expensive one, a burdensome one. And what it's creating is the need for middlemen. And guess what? More often than not, unfortunately nowadays, the middlemen, these foreign labor agencies, too many of them, are in fact human traffickers who are utilizing this system, the legal immigration system, to bring people into this country, and once they're here, to hold them against their will. We've got to focus on that, because ultimately that has to be solved. Our legal immigration system has to be modernized. If it isn't, one of the problems that we'll continue to face is this issue of human trafficking. Now, the good news is, here in Congress, there's a bill that's a reauthorization of the TVPRA. It passed out of the Senate Judiciary Committee in October of this month, in October of this year, by a 12-6 vote, and it does a few things. It promotes increased cooperation among the federal agencies, between the United States and other countries, and it supports and it enhances the victim-centered approach, which basically says we're going to approach this from the viewpoint of the victim and create protections and security for the victim and their families so they can cooperate, so they can help us prosecute these people. And the bill focuses on cutting off human trafficking at its roots by supporting international efforts to focus on this. And there are a lot of countries out there that want to do the right thing. They either don't have the resources or the knowledge base to do it. And there are some countries out there that don't mind this. In fact, they cooperate with this stuff. They like that it's going on in their countries. They're on the take, so to speak. And they need to be called out for what they're doing as well. And finally, it promotes accountability. It ensures that the federal funds are being used for their intended purposes, and it reduces the authorization levels to address fiscal concerns, but focuses on the programs that have been most effective. And so my hope is that that bill, which is a bipartisan bill, will come to this floor soon, that we'll have an opportunity to make it better, to get it passed, to work with our colleagues in the House, to send a very clear message that this is a priority, that this is something we should all agree on and work together on. It is a great cause to be involved in. It is one of the great humanitarian, human rights causes of the 21st century. And I think how we deal with it or fail to deal with it will say a lot about us as a people and as a nation. And I hope that I can encourage as many of my colleagues as possible to take this cause up as their own. And I look forward in the weeks to come to be able to come on the floor here and talk more about it. And with that, I yield the floor.